Okay, this is a review of factoring. The unit that we're about to cover, Unit 7, requires that you know how to factor. Therefore, this is going to take you through all the different ways to factor, and then you're going to be required to do some practice. This is for a grade, so you need to make sure you watch the video and understand it and continue on to do the practice. Okay, the first thing that we're going to look at is when we factor, okay, you need to look to see if there's a greatest common factor. So you're going to have a expression that looks like this, and I'm looking to see if there's a greatest common factor. So you want to look first at the numbers, okay, 15 and 20. So I'm looking for a greatest common factor of 15 and 20. Now you can write out all the factors of each of them, but hopefully at this stage you're able to recognize that 5 can divide evenly into 15 and into 20. So I know that 5 is my greatest common factor. Okay. And then I'm looking at the variable x to the fourth, x to the third. So I can only divide out x to the third. Okay. And essentially what you're doing is you're just taking your greatest common factor, which is 5x to the third, and dividing that out of both terms. This is the opposite of distributing. So 15x to the fourth, look at the numbers first. 15 divided by 5 is 3. X to the fourth divided by x to the third is just x. Minus 20 divided by 5 is 4. X to the third divided by x to the third is 1. So our final answer would be x. 5, x to the third, times the quantity x3 minus 4. Now if you were to multiply this back together, you should come back up with your original expression. So again, the goal here is to find the greatest common factor. This is always the first step. You should always look to see if you could divide anything out. Okay, let's look at the next one. So the next thing you have to do is you have to look and you have to decide how many terms are given in the polynomial. So we're going to go first down the middle. So if it has 3 terms, for example, it looks like this. I have 1, 2, 3 terms. If it has 3 terms, then you're going to find numbers that multiply to -6 that add up to your middle term. In this case, your middle term, even though you don't, it's invisible, you know your middle term is 1. So I'm looking for factors of -6 that add up to 1. Okay? You should be able to do this in your head, but if you cannot do it in your head, then you need to be able to use the trick in the calculator. Okay, so the trick here is that you're going to do -6 divided by x, and then -6 divided by x plus x. You go into the table, okay, x and y1 show you factors, okay, of -6. Of course, we're looking for whole numbers. So I have -6 times 1 is -6. Keep going. -3 times 2 is -6. But the key is you need something that adds up to +1. Well, that's what this y2 column tells you. It tells you what the two factors add up to. So I'm going to keep going down, and here's +1, and I see my factors are -2 and 3. Okay, so then your answer is going to be x minus 2, x plus 3. Okay, and that's all you have to do for these. So those are your two factors. This has a leading coefficient of 1, so there's no number in front. Now, for ones that have a leading coefficient of 1 are going to be treated a little differently. But what you're going to do at this point is you're going to go flip the page and you're going to do A through F. All of these are quadratic trinomials with leading coefficients of 1. Again, let's do one more. Okay, for A, you have a leading coefficient of 1. I have 3 terms, so I know I need factors of 56 that add up to the middle term, which is -15. The calculator will do this for you. So I have I have 56 divided by x, 56 divided by x plus x. This shows you the factors. This shows you what the factors add up to. I'm looking for -15, so those are my two factors. So I have x minus 7, x minus 8. And you're done. That's all you have to do with these. If you were to multiply this back together, you would get back to our x squared minus 15x plus 56. And let me show you why this works. So I have negative 7 times negative 8. That's going to give me the positive 56. And then negative 7 plus negative 8, which is going to give me the negative 15. Okay, so these are very easy to check to make sure you've done correctly. So B, C, D, E, and F are all going to be done the same way. So I want you to pause the video and go ahead and try those before you move on to the next section. Okay, the next is a trinomial. So again, I have three terms, 1, 2, 3, and the leading coefficient is greater than 1. So my leading coefficient here is 6, which is clearly greater than 1. So there's an extra step, okay, in these type of problems. The first thing is I have the 6 here, so I'm going to multiply the 6 times the negative 10, okay? 6 times negative 10 is negative 60. All right, the next thing I want you to do is I want to write the first term and the last term. 6x squared minus 10. Those terms aren't going to change. What you're doing, though, is you're going to be replacing this term, the 11x, with the two factors that we can find. So that goes back to our same thing. We're going to do negative 60 divided by x, negative 60 divided by x plus x. Okay, and I'm looking for that 11 here in the last column. There it is right there. So I see my factors are negative 4 and 15. So I'm going to replace that positive 11 with minus 4x plus 15x. Okay, we just are splitting that term apart. Now what you're going to do is you're going to group these two, the first two and the last two. And you're going to look for a GCF. So we're going to go back up to here the way that we look for a GCF. The GCF of 6 and 4 is 2. The GCF of x squared and x is simply x. And remember, I'm dividing out that 2x out of each term. And we're grouping these together, so we're just going to do the first two terms. So that gives me 3x minus 2. All right, I'm going to look at the next one, 15x and 10. 15 and 10, I can take out a 5. And I'm going to take out a positive 5, so I'm going to write plus 5 on the outside. Okay, and 15x divided by 5 is 3x. Negative 10 divided by 5 is minus 2. So I see I have a common factor here. So my first factor is 3x minus 2, and then my next factor is 2x plus 5. So those are my two factors. Now, if you have learned a different way called slip and slide, I'm going to show that method right now. If you're comfortable with the way that I just showed, please do not, you can skip this next part because I'm going to do the same problem but just show you in a little different way. So I have 6x squared. I'm going to rewrite this problem on the back because the thing is there's multiple ways to do these, so you need to find the way that works for you and do that way. Okay, this is the slip and slide method. Okay, so you're going to multiply the 6 times the negative 10 and rewrite x squared plus 11x minus 60. Okay. You're going to find the multiples of negative 60 that add up to 11, okay, which we've done already. We have negative 4 and 15. So I have x minus 4, x plus 15. Okay. Now, you have to take that 6 that we originally multiplied and we've got to divide the 6 and reduce. Okay, so you slip the 6 over here. Now we've got to slide it back. Now before you can slide it back, you need to reduce these fractions. And again, the calculator will do that as well. So 4 divided by 6 is going to give you 2 over 3. Okay, and then 15 over 6 is going to give you 5 over 2. Okay, now we're going to slide back. Slide your 3 over here. So that's going to give me 3x minus 2. Slide the 2. That's going to give me 2x plus 5. Notice that I came up with the exact same answer. If you're uncomfortable with grouping, then you may use the slip and slide method. But please be careful, because if you don't slide the 2 back or the 3 back, then the answer is wrong. Okay, the answer is not x minus 4, x plus 15. So that's where some of you are going to make mistakes, and that's why if you do this method, you need to be very, 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 very careful. Okay? All right. So now, if you look, we have some practice here with factor and quadratic trinomials with a leading coefficient greater than 1. Remember to always look to see if there's a GCF to factor out. So let's do one more together. So I look here, I have 2, 5, 3. There's no GCF here. Okay, so I'm going to multiply the 2 times the negative 3. That just gives me negative 6. And remember, I'm looking for numbers that add up to positive 5. So I'm going to do grouping here. You can do slip and slide if you'd like. I've got 2x squared minus 3. This, I'm going to split this term into 2 terms. And those 2 terms need to multiply to negative 6 and add up to 5. So we can put that into the calculator. So I have negative 6 divided by x. Negative 6 divided by x plus x. Oops. Go to your table, not the graph. Okay, and I'm looking for positive 5. So there's positive 5 of negative 1 and 6. So my 2 terms are negative 1 and 6. And that's what I'm going to split these 2 terms into. Minus 1x, I'm not going to write the 1, plus 6x. Now, group the first 2 together. What can you factor out? I can factor out an x, which leaves me 2x minus 1. Please be careful, that is 1. X divided by x is 1. The next one, I can factor out a 3. It'd be a positive 3, so I'm going to write plus 3. And that gives me x, 2x, minus 1. Again, we're dividing out 3 for this one. Notice that I have 2 factors that match. So my factors are 2x minus 1, x plus 3. If you want to slip and slide, then that's fine. I showed you the process. If you're comfortable with this, I would prefer you to go this route. Okay. In this section, you have B, C, D, E, and F to do. It's the same exact process. Please pause the video and try all of those problems. Okay, coming back to our flow chart here. So we've dealt with 3 terms. Okay, these are your 2 ways. Let's go over here to the left and look at if there's 2 terms. So the first thing is if there's 2 terms, okay, and they're both perfect squares, then the formula is a squared minus b squared. Notice it is the difference, is a plus b, a minus b. Okay, so if it's 2 terms and they're both, a squared and b squared. So what you want to do is you want to look at what a is and what b is. In this case, a equals x, b equals 7. Essentially, you're looking if this is x squared, okay, well, what's the square root of x squared? Just x. Ignore the negative, okay, because you're taking care of that because it's the difference of 2 squares. 49, square root of 49 is 7. So you have to make sure you take the square root of both of them to get what your a and b is. Then you know your 2 factors. X plus 7, x minus 7. And you're done. Okay? If you look at 3, okay, factoring the difference of perfect squares. I just told you these are all the difference of perfect squares. We're going to do one more together on the video. So try a and b on your own. Make sure you look to see if there's a GCF first. But I want to take a look at this one. So I have 16x to the 4th minus 1. Okay, so I'm sorry, y to the 4th. When you see this y to the 4th, you want to think about what's the square root of 16y to the 4th? That's going to give me my a value for my factors. Well, the square root of 16 is 4. Well, the square root of y to the 4th is y squared. Okay, remember all that practice we did with y times y times y times y. There's 4 y's. I've got 2 groups, so that means y squared. So a equals y squared, and then the square root of 1 is simply 1, so that makes me b1. Then we can go back to our formula now that we know a and b, and we're going to substitute 4y squared plus 1 and 4y squared minus 1. Okay, now for this one you want to take a look to see if I can factor anything else. So this 4y squared plus 1, I can't go any further with that, so I'm just going to go ahead and write that down. 4y squared plus 1. But if you notice, this 4y squared minus 1 is a perfect square, the difference of perfect squares again. Okay, so for this case, my a equals 2y, my b equals 1 again, which means that I can factor this further. You always want to check to see if you can factor it further. 2y plus 1, 2y minus 1. Now you're done. So always check to make sure that you can factor it further. Okay? Alrighty. Let's go on to another way. So I have the difference in the sum of cubes. Okay? Notice that this is different because these are cubes, difference in sum of cubes. So they're very similar, it's just some of the signs are different. So if you have the difference of cubes, which means I have a cubed minus b cubed, your two factors, when you do that, are going to be a minus b, a squared plus a times b plus b squared. Alright, so let's talk about how to remember that. So if I have a cubed and b cubed, first of all you want to look at the sign. So I have a negative sign here, negative, positive, positive. The rule to remember is SOAP. This is going to be the same sign. So this is minus, so this is minus. The opposite sign, this is plus. So I started with a minus, so the opposite of that will be plus. And then this last one is always positive. So we say SOAP. Same, opposite, always positive. Again, same sign, opposite sign, always positive. All right, so similar to when we were doing squares, we're doing the difference of cubes. So this time we're going to do the cube root of 8x cubed, and that's going to give me a. Okay, so that's going to be 2x. If you don't know your cube roots, the cube root is in the calculator. You can't do the variables, you have to do those by hand. But if you go to math, number 4, and put the 8 in there, that'll tell you what the cube root is. So I have 2x, and then the cube root of 1 is just simply 1. Okay, and that's going to be my b. So I have b is 1, a is 2. That's where you need to start. Okay, once you recognize that it's the difference of cubes, you need to start here and tell me what my a and what my b is. Now I can substitute in here. Now there's a little trick here. So it's a minus b because it's the same sign. So 2x minus 1. That's where you have to start. You just have to remember that. The next part, I have a little trick here. What you're going to do, because it's cubed, you're going to write your a 3 times. 2x, 2x, times 2x. And then you're going to write your b 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then you're going to group them. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. Now remember, we've got to look at the signs. We have plus, because it's the opposite sign. I'm going to group the next two. 2x times 1 is simply 2x. Always positive, so I'm going to have a plus. 1 times 1, which is going to give me 1. Okay. All right, you always want to double check. Can you factor any further? You cannot factor this any further over real numbers. Quick way to check to see if you can factor further is if you put that into the calculator and you look at the graph, notice that it doesn't go through the x-axis, which means that they're going to be imaginary solutions. So you can't go any further with that. Okay. All right, and then we have the sum of cubes, which is very similar, okay, except our signs are going to be different. So if I have a cubed plus b cubed, my factors then are going to be a, same sign, plus b times a squared, opposite sign, minus ab, always positive, times, or sorry, plus b squared. So it's the same SOAP, same opposite, always positive for the signs, okay? It's just different because I started with negative up here, positive here. So same sign, opposite sign, always positive. And then we still have our a plus b, a squared, minus a times b plus b squared. Okay? All right. So now we need to, we need to know what our a and b is. A equals 2x. Notice I'm working with the same problem here, except now this is the sum. B equals 1. And again, you can use that trick where I'm going to write 2x times 2x times 2x, and then 1 times 1 times 1. So I know that my first is going to be a plus b. So 2x plus 1. And then I have 2x times 2x, 4x squared, minus 2x times 1, which is 2x, always positive, 1 times 1, which is 1. Again, let's check to see if that can be factored. So this is minus. And again, this is not factorable over real numbers, so we're going to stop there. I know this one's kind of tedious, but if you do some practice problems on this, I think it will help. So if you notice here, number 4, factoring the difference in sum of perfect cubes. Please follow the pattern. Double check to make sure there's not a GCF. Like in this first one, there is a GCF that you need to factor out. Okay? And I'm not going to go any further with that because there's only 3 problems there. All right, let's go back. We have one more type of factoring to look at. Is grouping. Okay? If you're able to group the trinomial with leading coefficient, this problem shouldn't be an issue. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to group the first 2 and then group the second 2. You're going to say, what can I factor out of here? I can factor out of x squared. So it's going to give me x squared times x plus 2. Then you're going to look here, what can I factor out? Notice that if this first term is negative, you're going to have to factor out a negative. So I'm going to factor out negative 3. So minus 3, which is going to give me x plus 2. Notice that this matches. So I have a factor of x plus 2, and then what remains on the outside, x squared minus 3. Check to see if you can factor any further, either of those, which I cannot. The 3 is not a perfect square, so that's not a difference of perfect squares. And that is it. Okay, so let's take a look. We have some grouping problems here. So 5, factoring by grouping, you have 3 problems to do, so you want to pause the video and do those 3 problems now. Okay, so I made a note here, you have to know how to factor for Unit 7. If you cannot factor for Unit 7, it's going to be nearly impossible. Okay, I'm giving you until the 16th. This is due on the 16th and 17th. This is for a grade. If you cannot factor by the 16th through 17th, I will be calling home and running a Saturday school, hopefully in about a week or so. I will let you know about that. So if this is not done and you cannot factor by the 16th or 17th, depending on when you have class with me, you will be receiving a call home so that we can address that issue with your parents. All right, last thing. So I went through and we've done individually each thing. Okay, the problem is you've got to be able to recognize what to do. So that's the next step. Once you've practiced the factoring, you have to recognize what to do. So if you, number 6, you're going to factor each of the polynomials, and a through I, and they're mixed. They're every different kind of factoring that we talked about. Difference of squares, trinomial with leading coefficient equal to 1, difference of cubes, sum of cubes, grouping, trinomial leading coefficient greater than 1, greatest common factor. You've got to be able to do all of these and pick them out, okay? So for example, I'm just going to pick one here. I see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. I'm going to look at this sheet. I see 4 terms. I have to factor by grouping. Okay, let me pick one more. Let's do this one. G has 1, 2, 3 terms. I know that I'm in this column then because there's 3 terms. And then I want to look. Can I factor anything out? Nope, there's no greatest common factor, which means my leading coefficient is greater than 1, which means that this is the process that you have to do. Okay, the only way you're going to be good at this is to practice it. I've shown you every trick that I know to help you, but at this point, you're going to have to practice this. So lastly, A through I is the last part of your homework to do. Good luck!